Okay, I'm going to be speaking about Greek mythology today, and talking about the Trojan War specifically, and the beginning of the Trojan War, when the Achaeans, or we'll call them the Greeks, they weren't really Greeks yet, but they were called the Achaeans, and also their allies were the Danans. They were camped on the Trojan beach, and hadn't been there very long. It just arrived. They had the blessings of the gods to sack Troy, and there was an incident with Agamemnon and the high priest of Apollo, which also resulted in 9 days of Apollo shooting plague arrows down onto the Achaeans or the Greeks, which killed tens of thousands of them actually. So when they just arrived on the beaches with the blessings of God to go ahead and take down Troy, well, they lost that blessing. The unique insight I'm offering is the details on how they kind of mess things up right at the beginning. In the Trojan story of the Trojan War, uh, in the story of what happens when a high priest of Apollo is completely attacked by Agamemnon and threatened and also disrespected when he was holding a scepter of Apollo in his hand. And of course, Agamemnon knew that. He saw it, which meant that Apollo, the god, was very angered because his high priest had his scepter in hand when he was in the vicinity of talking to Agamemnon. And I'll get into the details in the story and tell you all about it. It's a very exciting story, and it's very interesting because in the story, in the story in the Iliad, they don't speak on any of what I'm about to tell you and speak about. They don't. It doesn't mention any of this, and in fact, you wouldn't be able to ascertain any unless you had some knowledge of how to see it. So understand what this story is about. It's going to be offering unique insights into the Trojan War, which once heard, I'm sure you'll agree, and ultimately it should excite you and ultimately surprise and shock you, because this information certainly surprised and shocked and excited me when I was given it. So I was given this information from my source, and I loved it. I thought, wow, that makes perfect sense. Okay, so what the point of this video is to tell of the part in the story in the Trojan War when the Achaeans just arrived on the beaches of Troy. Hadn't been there very long, and they had the blessings of all the gods and goddesses to take Troy down. For whatever reason, Troy needed to be sacked. It was something. It was the will of God, perhaps, or at least the goddesses, or yeah, the Achaeans went there with the blessings of the gods and goddesses to do what they're supposed to do, was take Troy down. And they had been there not long, and just arrived. In fact, when an incident occurred, which is talked about, a story that is talked about, and I'll tell you about it in a second here. And but the thing is that they tell you about the story or the incident. They mention the incident and its details, but they don't tell you anything about the fact that the incident I'm about to tell you about was the reason why it took 10 whole years to sack Troy and not 10 days or 10 months. So I want you to know that if this incident hadn't occurred, they could have taken Troy in less than a year or maybe 10 months, not 10 years, certainly. And it took 10 years because of this incident caused it to take 10 years. And it might have been that Troy would never be sacked. But it did take 10 years, and it was sacked. It certainly might have not been sacked. But the Trojans, after 10 years, had violated some principles which were unforgivable, and they hadn't changed after 10 years. And they were most of all given 10 years to change. Many of the heroes of Troy, the will of the Trojan men, had been destroyed after 10 years of battle. The most influential, spiritual, powerful Trojan warriors were often dead. 10 years later into it, there were many of the best Trojan influence of society were gone, which meant that Troy had a chance to now change, but they still stuck to their guns. Even principles that had been removed spiritually and were dead now were kept alive by the Trojans, because they honored the dead and the principles of who used to rule us. And they may be dead, but we're still going to uphold their law. And that would truly be an honorable thing of the Trojans to do, to uphold their laws of the dead, of the long and gone. But ultimately, that was also a mistake. The gods wanted them to change a lot of things and in particularly about the ego. The ego in the Trojan men in Troy was ultimately something Zeus loved. The ego came from Zeus. It came from Zeus to men, and men took the ego. It was an important part of what Zeus was, but it was not in a man who didn't know what to do with it. When you take the Spirit of God and put it into a man, that man has the Spirit of God. He becomes, in a sense, like God, is God, but only spiritually and mentally. Because if I have the Spirit of God, actually, well, I'm actually him, maybe, because I got a spirit. And it's mine in a sense. I'm borrowing it. But the reality is my body's just a mortal flesh thing. So, I mean, just because I feel immortal and brave and I'm a hero, well, often what happens to an immortally feeling brave hero is you end up dead soon and quickly. And maybe in battle on the first day, yeah, you charge right in and you're like a god, but your body's just, that's where the saying comes, the spirit is strong, but the flesh is weak. So the incident occurred when they had captured some of their first prisoners and sacked the temple of Apollo during their arrival on the beach. When the Achaeans arrived on the beach, Achilles arrived first. He was black sail, which meant that he was using a black sail, and all the Greek ships used white sails. And but he was standing out as the black sail. Ultimately, to have a black sail down was a kind of mourning. If you used a black sail, it was an indication of many things. You could be telling someone something. If you came into port with a black sail, they could see your ship and they'd say, "Oh, something's wrong. He's got black sail," which meant that there was many reasons for it. Usually, it was something was wrong for sure. And if you saw a ship coming in with the black sail, then you knew they were trying to tell you, "Look at our If you see us coming with a black sail, we are in trouble, or something is way wrong." And ultimately, Achilles insisted on sailing all the time with a black sail, all the time. And the Greeks thought that you don't sail with a black sail unless you're trying to indicate there's trouble, or we're done for, or look out, here we come, and it's not good. So ultimately, the Greeks would have discouraged Achilles to be sailing around his ship with a black sail, but he was mourning his existence. Achilles was a man who mourned his existence. He was not always happy, but he was often miserable, angry, discouraged, and then fighting and blaming things. Achilles was a emotional torment of struggle. In his mind, he struggled with many things. We could talk about that, what was wrong with him, but probably not in this video. Let's start with the incident that occurred that caused the Achaeans to have to fight 10 years instead of maybe 10 months to defeat Troy. So the incident is when they collected prisoners. When Achilles first came on shore, he was the first ship to get there, because he went insistingly made his men row faster along with the sail power to get in front of the Greek navy as a whole. They were in formation, and Achilles didn't want to be in their formation. He wanted to get ahead of them, or he would have been even satisfied with maybe letting them go in front if he couldn't get ahead, but he certainly tried to get ahead first because he didn't want to be behind them, and he didn't want to be in the formation of the Greek ships whatsoever. Achilles felt that to be traveling across the sea with the Achaeans, or with Agamemnon, especially head king of that army, was a disgrace to his insult and his intelligence. He didn't like Agamemnon whatsoever, and in fact, he hated him. And so did Agamemnon hate Achilles. But Achilles was a subject, according to Agamemnon, and Agamemnon felt that he was that Achilles was at his disposal as his soldier, and so served him. So Achilles would do it, and ultimately didn't want to do it, didn't like to do it, but he did it because his mother wanted him to, and ultimately so did Zeus. And at the same time, he didn't have to do it. He agreed to do it because he also took himself and disrespected Agamemnon often. He'd come around Agamemnon, like what do you want? And like Agamemnon would be like, I need you to do something for me. Okay, fine, but tell me then. But I don't have to do anything for you. So ultimately, every interaction Achilles had with Agamemnon was always a problem in an argument, or about a ready fight, or Agamemnon would threaten him, like, if you keep sassing me, boy, then I could like have you whipped. Oh yeah, try it. Achilles would say, you're not my king. Oh really? So they were always having conflicts, Achilles and Agamemnon. Achilles first tried to get in front of the Greek formation, and he was willing to let them go ahead if he couldn't do it, but he wanted to try it. First, he did it. So he had his rowers going full time, and he had someone yelling at him, faster, faster, because he wanted to get in front. So they did. It wasn't that hard to get in front of way and ahead of the formation. So the Achilles was in a singular vessel, very much far in front of body of the Navy coming in. So he was not with them. He was ahead of them, way in front by himself. Agamemnon knew this and saw that, and he thought, well, maybe Achilles is suicidal. He wants to attack the beach himself. But ultimately, Achilles was not suicidal, other than to say it could have been he had tendencies to not care about living or dying because he wasn't afraid to die. That was one maybe problem with him, is he wasn't fearing death or scared of it whatsoever. So yeah, it could have got him killed, in the sense that he was partly immortal. His mother, yeah, he had a protection too. So Achilles was the son of a goddess, and he was a demigod himself. He was only part human. He was part goddess. So they say that Achilles might have been a demigod or a legend, but truly what he was he was not a demigod. He was a demigoddess. And what's kind of funny about this whole thing is when you understand that he's not, his dad was a human man, and his mother was Thetis, the full-fledged goddess of kind of like of the sea, of Poseidon. She was a powerful goddess, one of the more powerful ones. So he was not just a mere mortal. Achilles was a partly a human and also partly a divine goddess man. And that was also why he was suffering in conflict. He would have a life of strife internally in his mind, because he would be always kind of not really feeling it. Like, I don't have God. I don't have the powerful, mighty, happy dad. My dad was just a man. My mom, I got her immortal greatness. And to him, it was almost a scourge or an irritation. It was certainly constantly an agitation to him. And so he also appreciated it and loved his mother. So he felt guilty. There was every kind of problem that Achilles would have to deal with. He was an emotionally distraught and often angry, losing his temper. And yeah, he couldn't deal with life. And as great and powerful as he was emotionally messed up. He was emotionally mental. He's a mental case. Agamemnon called him a crazy fool. And ultimately, he was pretty invincible in battle, because he had the spirit of his mother. She was a deity. So what his spirit was part deity. And what that meant was that the influence of his spirit was present within his body, and it was felt everywhere. People felt him. Like when he came to you, you could feel a goddess coming to you, or a powerful deity, and it would be felt like his emotions. You could not only feel them, but if he was angry at you, you would be fearing him, like he's going to kill you. You'd be afraid of him, and you couldn't help yourself, and you'd be scared. And I'm saying that is him and his strength, and why you can't find your courage on the field of battle has everything to do with the divinity in him. Is that he was strong enough in spirit to literally scare the crap out of armies, and sometimes whole armies would run away from him, like hundreds of men all at once would just say, "Oh my God, we're not fighting Achilles. He's going to kill us all." And he would. Achilles could fight and kill hundreds of men. He could take hundreds of men all at once. He would dance like a ballerina in battle. And if you saw Achilles fight, it looked like he was a ballerina, you know what I'm saying? A ballerina. He fought like a ballerina, and his fighting on the field would appear like a dance. He was dancing because he could dance with that sword, and he would do all these little dances and jumps and spins and twirls, and he would be chopping people to pieces, like in some orchestration of seeing him fight was not just a display of holy shock, but like if you saw Achilles fight, you'd say that's a god right there. That's no man, because he certainly fought like a god and was part goddess actually. When he got to the beach, though, his mentality of anger, well, like I said, it was unfortunate that Achilles looked in the mirror and he didn't like what he saw. He saw his mother and himself, and it made him ashamed of himself. He also loved her, which made him more ashamed and feel guilty too, for like why he was so upset was partly because he didn't like her, and he loved her too. So he felt bad about it. He was a skeptic. Yeah, just a negative person. When he took the beach, he took it with his one ship. He insisted that he was going to get on that beach before the body of the aquian, someday to be Greek army. He wanted to do it for a few reasons with his Myrmidons, which were way better trained fighters. The Myrmidons were specific fighters, and they were like the special forces or elite. So they're kind of like the Navy SEALs, or like the Myrmidons weren't just fighters. They were the best of the best, handpicked, that were veterans. All of them were veterans, and they were men that fought like gods, even though they weren't gods. They were headed by Achilles himself, who was also not a god. He was half goddess. And understand, this is one insight I want to introduce to you. And the first one that this won't be told to you, that in fact, it's important to know that Achilles' mentality has everything to do with where he came from. And it's important to know that he had mental issues and problems because he had the influence of his mother, whom, being someone he loved very deeply, he also couldn't stand to actually exist as. He took the beach, and the first place he landed by chance, and probably not by chance, was right near the Temple of Apollo, that it was close to the beach, and was one of the Apollo's temples that was in the Troy area. It happened to be right near the beach. And so the place he landed, like I said, was probably no accident. But he didn't know it was there until he took the beach. He took the beach. He insisted he was going to do it with his myrmidons to prove that when Agamemnon got there, well, basically that he could say, like, you didn't really do much. I already took the beach. So he wanted to take the beach. By the time Agamemnon and his army showed up, Achilles wanted to have that beach already under control and taken. Certainly Achilles was great enough to actually consider to do such a thing, but Agamemnon saw it as an insane suicidal move. So when Agamemnon realized that Achilles was doing it, he could see the ship was way in front, but he also could see that he attacked the beach with one ship by himself and his 50 myrmidons. So Agamemnon saw it happening while he was way in the back and probably 2 hours away still. But they could see with their telescopes, they could see that what was going on. And Agamemnon thought that Achilles wants to die because he's suicidal. And Agamemnon expected that there'd be nothing left of those myrmidons, and even Achilles couldn't take on the entire Trojan front. But he was doing it. In fact, that beach was defended by a contingent of the Trojan army, of archers and fighters, and they were there, and there's many of them there on the beach defending it, lookouts and an army. So when he attacked the beach, he was attacking probably 500 men with his 50, and many of them were archers. And when he attacked the beach, he had to confront basically an army and that outnumbered him in a defense that was fortified. So it was kind of suicidal, and he was not concerned for his men or his myrmidons' lives, because he wasn't worried about dying, and he wasn't worried about his myrmidon men dying. And I want to put that into your thinking process. Understand that Achilles was not capable of seeing anything turning out to be but the way he insisted it was going to be. And it wasn't that he thought his myrmidons could die and that's just fine with him. He thought his myrmidons can't die because it's not okay, and he doesn't accept it. So he would declare with his will that we shall not die and we shall live. I promise. There's no way I'm going to be wrong. And ultimately, you might see that as kind of a crazy mentality of a psychotic kind of behavior of Achilles is going to attack an army of 10,000 strong with his 50 men. He would do it. And understand that the crazy part of it is Achilles did attack an army once of 10,000 strong with 150 or so of his men, and they ran away. He routed the entire army because none of the army wanted to die that day. And they saw Achilles coming and said, we're not going to die today. We're not going to fight today either. So understand that whole armies ran from Achilles, one single man. Whole armies would run away from. So that was something you need to know too, is that Achilles was the powerful spirit of a deity and his mother. And when a mad goddess comes at you and she's going to kill you, your ass, you'll feel it. And ultimately, when it's a man, and as big as Achilles was and muscular as he was, he was a sight to behold, for he looked like a god. He had a demeanor that was good looking, very large, but not like Hercules, but like Sylvester Stallone, kind of big. He was like obviously impressive to look at, let alone when you watched him fight, you said that was a god that's fighting, that's no man. And he fought like no man ever fought or was known to fight. And he did it like a ballerina dance. And it was exclusively a style that no one had seen and no one has ever seen since. So he was truly a legend, Achilles was. The way he fought had a unique style that was godlike, more like goddess. Okay, so he attacked the temple of Apollo, and just because it was where the location was. So the first thing he did was he was already mentally upset. See, so when he went up when he approached the temple with the myrmidons after they had just taken the beach, it took him about 20 minutes to take 500 off, and it was easy because ultimately, yeah. And so Achilles now had secured the beach, like 20 minutes, half hour. And then it was like basically the Trojans ran back and they were like running away. Yeah, they were like, oh my God, we're getting attacked and we better run if we don't want to die. So they went back and to report that they're under attack. And so basically now Achilles and his myrmidons are left on the beach alone. And Achilles is going to go into that temple. He finds some priests in that temple and ultimately takes them prisoner. They're women, and takes them prisoner. And then he proceeds to go out in front, and there's a statue of Apollo, the sun god himself, a very elegant, large, well-made, and expensive golden statue with gold all over it. It was impressive to look at and worth a lot. And he proceeded to take his sword and chop off the head or smack the head off of the god Apollo. And he was angry, and he was basically his feeling was to murder the god Apollo, or to like, I'll kill your ass, and then bam, he did it. So basically the head came rolling off the statue. So Apollo saw that. He was watching the whole time. Apollo, the god, was watching what was going on. He saw Achilles attempt to kill his image in the statue, and ultimately was suddenly very pissed off and offended that not only would Achilles make such a gesture, but he was at that moment deciding no longer to support Achilles or even support the idea of the Greek army. But he hadn't made an actual decision right then as to what he was going to do about it. But it was a big mistake for Achilles to make that gesture to defile the statue of Apollo. He offended Apollo directly, who was now pissed and offended and feeling like, oh, you have just offended me, Achilles. You make me mad now. I was for you a minute ago. You just came and smashed my temple. And yeah, you're not supposed to even attack the temple. And Achilles should have left the temple alone and not even went inside. He shouldn't have harassed the two women that were in there. He shouldn't have harassed them or let alone taken them prisoner. At least he didn't kill them. But the idea is that certainly he should have left the temple alone. And some of the rules of war would dictate that you don't dare go attack a temple of Apollo, who's a god, when you're trying to actually attack Troy, who are a bunch of egotistical men, and you have support of those gods to attack those egotistical men and destroy them. But Apollo also supported Achilles until that moment. And at that moment, he decided that now you're in trouble, and I'm not sure what I'm going to do yet. So right then and there, Achilles was not in so much trouble other than he just lost the support of Apollo. It would get worse. Within 24 hours, it would now turn into a direct attack on the entire Greek or Achaean fleet with the plague. And also Apollo would spend 9 days shooting arrows at the Greeks on the beach. So the next day, the father of one of the priestesses that was taken prisoner at that temple, well, now she was a prisoner and in the custody of Achilles and the Myrmidons. When Agamemnon and the army arrived on the beach shortly, a couple hours later, they saw that you've got some prisoners. You already took the beach, basically. Good for you. That would have been Agamemnon saying that to Achilles. Now give me my prisoners. So Agamemnon took the two prisoners from the temple away from Achilles. Achilles certainly did not approve of it, and they almost got into a fight right there, meaning Achilles said, you can't have my prisoners, they're mine. And Agamemnon said, I'm the king here, and they're mine now. And ultimately, there was an altercation right at that moment where Achilles was about to attack Agamemnon and cut his head off, and Agamemnon was about to sick his bodyguards on Achilles to cut his head off. And in the confrontation that about took place, it was going to happen. It was going to happen. So that in the end, Achilles was about to kill Agamemnon and his bodyguards, and the goddess Minerva was watching as well. In fact, all the gods and goddesses were watching it like a movie. They're all full attention of the entire Mount Olympus, and all the pantheon of the gods and goddesses were eating popcorn, watching this, everything about what was going on. So the goddess Minerva realized that Achilles was about to kill Agamemnon and his bodyguards, which would just screw everything up, because she said, wait a minute, we need Agamemnon to sack Troy, and Achilles could do it, but ultimately, Achilles can't run the entire Achaean army. Achilles doesn't even want to. So we need Agamemnon, and so he's got his army there. They're going to listen to him. They're not going to listen to Achilles, and Achilles wouldn't even want to have nothing to do with ruling them. She said, we cannot allow Achilles to kill Agamemnon. So what are we going to do about it? So the gods and goddesses are saying everything's about to go wrong. So Minerva flew off of Mount Olympus, came down to the literal location right where they were having an argument and about to fight. She came into the room and appeared just to Achilles, who was standing there, and he was ready to draw a sword, and he was all red and mad. He was saying, don't you piss me off, you sack of wine," or whatever you would call him. Well, the movie said that's what he said, but I don't know if that's what he said or not. He was basically ready to kill him. He was mad. His face was red, and he has his hands on the sword. He's going to do it. Minerva right then came into the room and got in between the two, and the Agamemnon did not even see the goddess arrive, and he did not even know she was there. But she appeared before Achilles and showed herself to only Achilles. So she was standing in the room suddenly there in complete view of Achilles, and he would have assumed everyone could see her because he could see her. She was right there in the room in front of everybody. And ultimately only Achilles could see her because that's what she wanted. She didn't want anyone else to do it. She was a goddess. That was easily within her power. And so she told Achilles, "Get your hand off your sword, Achilles. You're my hero, and you're going to be a legend, and they're going to remember you forever. You're going to be the hero of this battle. You are the greatest, Achilles. You don't fail me now. You can't hurt Agamemnon. He needs to rule the Achaeans so we could do this. You have to stand down, Achilles." So Achilles is like, "Minerva, is that you, goddess?" and ultimately, now Achilles is suddenly, his attention's drawn to like, well, there's a goddess standing in front of me. It's Minerva. And he knew who she was because he knew his mother was a goddess. And Minerva said, "Achilles, take your hand off of that sword now and stand down. Agamemnon we need him." So Achilles knew right then and there, if a goddess is in front of my face and telling me that, then I'm going to obey. So he just took his hand off his sword. He just realized that, I guess I'm not killing Agamemnon and his bodyguards today. And she just was like, she loved Achilles, and she said, "Well, thank you," because he listened to her right away, and he backed right off. And ultimately, Agamemnon saw him do it and didn't know that she was standing there or had said anything to him or that he was even looking at her. Agamemnon didn't even know she was there. And Agamemnon merely saw, suddenly, to his surprise, Achilles go from about to draw a sword and red and breathing hard to suddenly take his hand off, stand down, and back up. And now he's in a kind of submissive posture, like, yeah, Agamemnon knew. "Oh, you don't have the courage to fight, do you? You don't want to try to hurt me and my bodyguards?" Ultimately, it was something like that. And ultimately, then the Minerva would spend a minute there talking to Achilles why Agamemnon is chastising and making fun and mocking Achilles for his courage loss. "Yeah, you don't have the fight to fight me now, boy?" Because basically Agamemnon thought that Achilles was backing down. And it must be because, yeah, he won. But ultimately Achilles was getting pissed again, and Minerva's sitting there saying, "Achilles, don't listen to him. Don't listen to him. He's trying to get you yeah, he's setting you up for failure. If you kill him, it's going to be you're going to fail. You're going to fail me. You're going to fail the gods. You're going to fail yourself. You're going to fail your mom, everyone. Achilles, don't let him make you mad." And Achilles was sitting there trying to practice it because Agamemnon was utterly trying to insult him, and he was one to get insulted so easily. So Minerva spent a minute there trying to help Achilles how to ignore that King Agamemnon. Don't listen to him. And he was trying, okay, fine, I'm trying to ignore him, but ultimately couldn't do it. But because she was there, he could do it. So the two prisoners that were taken from Achilles, it angered him really a lot. And Achilles would have never given them to Agamemnon and would have even killed Agamemnon and all his bodyguards, because Agamemnon, as much as his bodyguards were pretty badass, understand even Agamemnon was not fully aware of the nature of how great Achilles truly was. And truly Agamemnon had Zeus as his god and was the king of a realm, not just a kingdom. So the god Zeus had kind of Agamemnon under his protection, which meant that the Agamemnon would not have only been stupid enough to get himself killed, but he would have also thought that it wouldn't dare happen because Zeus would have said it's not going to happen. Now understand, that's why Minerva came running down, because Zeus sent her there. Zeus said, we're not going to let him kill Agamemnon. So Zeus liked Agamemnon and didn't want Achilles to kill him. And Agamemnon was ignorant. He certainly would have got himself killed because he would have provoked Achilles to do it. And whatever Agamemnon was thinking was ultimately something like, well, Zeus is my god, and he won't let me be killed by you. My bodyguards will be Zeus coming at you. And that's just why Minerva came down, because Zeus said, we can't have this confrontation happen. Um, and So the next day, after Agamemnon had now seized the prisoners from Achilles' custody, Achilles now went to go sulk in his tent in his own section with the Myrmidons that were not on the beach with the Greek army, because now the Myrmidons and Achilles were like a few miles off to the right by themselves, because he didn't want to be part of the Greek army or Agamemnon's army. So he wanted to be by himself. So he stood as his own little army off in the kind of to the side. So he went to sulk, and he refused to fight for Agamemnon now until Agamemnon apologized to him. So he sent messengers to tell Agamemnon that. And then, yeah, you could fight this war without me now. Now that what you've done is insult me. Yeah, basically, you can go ahead and fight this war without me. And you seize my prisoners. Well, they're mine, not yours. And ultimately, yeah. So he's now Achilles is not going to fight with the Greek army anymore, but he's camped over there and he's going to watch. And all the Myrmidons are upset because they're saying, we can't fight. No, we're going to be spectators now. We're going to watch these Achaeans try to do it on their own, see if Agamemnon can sack Troy by himself without me. Ultimately, without Achilles, Agamemnon cannot sack Troy. And that's why Achilles was needed. They needed Achilles in order to actually sack Troy, because Agamemnon, with all his might and power of the empire, was not strong enough to breach the walls of Troy, because the gods made those walls. The walls of Troy themselves were built by Apollo and Poseidon, two gods. And that story is a story in itself as to why that is. But understand that the walls themselves of Troy were built by the gods themselves, Apollo and Poseidon. Poseidon was a major god, the brother of Zeus. So they built those walls so they couldn't be penetrated, because Zeus loved the Trojans at first, before all this went down. Zeus thought the Trojans were the greatest example of men and might and spirit that existed on earth. They were his favorite. So the Trojan men were honored by Zeus himself as like, those are my men. Those Trojans are the best of the best, the cream of the crop. And ultimately, they became not so much of the cream of the crop. And it got to the point where now they're going to have a war and they're going to sack Troy. So when the gods went down there to build the Trojan walls to honor those Trojans, well, Apollo and Poseidon lived with the Trojans for a year as humans. And I'm not going to tell you the whole story about it, but they were actually humans, because it was a punishment that they had to build those walls. And why did they do it? Because Zeus said, you two can go build the walls of Troy so Troy will never be sacked. So there's nobody that's going to ever take down Troy. I don't care how big your army is. It's not getting into Troy. And so that was the idea as to why Troy was partially so egotistically able to be pompous and proud, and also why the ego went wrong and bad and became pompous and proud. Ultimately, the Trojan society and all the masculine spirit of the Trojan men were very aware their walls were made by the gods, but it was more than that. They personally knew Apollo and Poseidon, and they lived in the Trojan society among the Trojans for a whole year, which meant that the whole entire Trojan society had gods living with them for a whole year, and they ate dinner with them every night. And they went and, yeah, that whole society was integrated as we have had the gods as our guests for a whole year. They lived with us. They were our friends. They ate dinner at our tables. So the Trojans were very self-absorbed and self-important and not making it up. They certainly were honored utterly by the gods and all of them. So when it came down to the Trojan War suddenly happening, well, it was tragedy, because now the gods had agreed that Troy had to be sacked and taken down, because the ego had become pompously proud of itself and also a kind of godlike. The Trojan men and the masculine spirit of the Trojan army and society was kind of like, well, they thought they were Zeus and Mars and the gods, because they took their spirit and they also worshipped them. But they were also now egotistically doing things they shouldn't have been doing, and now the gods and goddesses didn't support them anymore. And when they decided that Troy should be sacked, they had a problem. Well, how can we sack it? The walls of Troy were built by the gods, by us, and we won't be able to breach them easily either. And of course, Apollo and Poseidon would add, well, it's not just we won't be able to breach them easily either, we won't be able to get through them either. We built them so not even we can get through them. Basically, even the gods would have a hell of a time trying to breach those walls. They made those walls so not even gods could get through them. And ultimately, Ares would be the one to attempt to breach the walls first, and he would fail utterly. It would take several weeks. So Ares would be in the beginning of the war, Ares would be the one to get in there. The god of war, Ares, would be, I'm the ground man. I'll get through those walls. And everyone thought maybe if anyone could do it, Ares could do it, because Ares, the god of war, was the singular young man spirit of who was a god, but he was ultimately the one to do it, the most aggressive, blood curdling, knife wielding god. Now, when the next day came, and now these two priestesses were under the jurisdiction of Agamemnon as prisoners in the Achaean army. Well, now there had just been a letter sent to Agamemnon from Achilles saying, we are not fighting for you. Good luck, buddy. I'm going to go pray to my mom and hope that the Trojans ask her. So this is how crazy it was. Achilles prayed to his mother, Thetis, in prayer and supplication and said, Mom, can you talk to Zeus and tell him to help the Trojans when the Achaeans attack tomorrow, to help the Trojans be strong and curse the Achaeans. And so Thetis, his mother, who's a goddess, she didn't want to do it. She wanted to tell her son, we can't go ask Zeus that, but understand, she loved her son so much and she would do anything for him. She also knew he's going to die. She also told him that. He also knew that. Achilles knew when he went to Troy, he would die. His mother said, if you go to Troy, you will never come back, but you'll be a legend and you'll be a myth for 2,000 years, 10,000 years. They'll never forget your name. Your name will go down in history. You will never be forgotten. And he said, wow, I'm going there, but you won't come back, son. Well, okay, Mom, but I'm going to be a legend for 10,000 years and they're going to remember me. They're going to remember you. What happens if I don't go there? You'll be loved and live long and have a family here, but you'll be forgotten. And so will your family and all your friends, and no one will know your name. So Achilles was going there for glorifying himself. And everyone knew this. Achilles even knew it. He knew he wouldn't come. He knew he was going to die. He also knew that it would happen only after Troy was sacked. So he wasn't even needing to worry about dying until probably at least when they were sacking Troy, actually. So Achilles was ready to start worrying about it when the sacking of Troy was taking place, because he knew he wouldn't die until at least that point. So Achilles felt pretty safe. We're not even able to sack Troy yet. We're not even there yet, so I'm not worried. So Thetis decided to go ahead and, she wanted to help him. She said, okay, but she didn't want to do it. She said she wasn't going to tell her son no. She said, Mom, can you go tell Zeus to help the Trojans and defeat the Achaeans tomorrow? So she said, okay. She went up to Mount Olympus and went to Zeus and said, Zeus, hi, I'm showing up. And Zeus is like, whoa, Thetis, what are you doing here? You don't usually come here and visit me. Well, yeah, I know, but I need you a favor. My son is asking me to ask you to help the Trojans not be, help them tomorrow. And my son is mad at Agamemnon, and now Zeus knew it all, because he suddenly looked at it and said, I see. And ultimately, Thetis said, can you make it so Agamemnon sucks tomorrow when they're fighting and he's going to be shamed? And Zeus said, I could do it, and I don't want to do it either. I really don't want to do it, but because Hera is going to be mad at me. So Hera would be furious because Hera was waiting for Agamemnon to sack Troy, and she wanted it to happen in 10 days. So Hera was like, we got to get this done. Those Trojans need to die. That Troy needs to be sacked. Hera was the wife and the main goddess. She was the mother goddess, the most powerful one. She was Zeus's wife. Well, sister too, maybe. But Hera was the leader of all the goddesses. And she hated the Trojans, utterly hated those egos. Those men think they're gods. They think they're my husband. They're ultimately only borrowing his spirit. And she couldn't stand the Trojans. She wanted them dead, every last one of them, even the babies. So Hera wanted the baby Trojans to be killed off too. It was crazy how we're going to remove the Trojans, but we're not going to let a baby live either. We're going to get rid of every one of them, because the ego is not surviving in this world, Hera thought, and the ego shall not rule. And Zeus didn't agree with that. He thought ego can rule if I like it. And that was a dispute between Hera and Zeus. So when the Achaeans the next day, when they were preparing for battle to make an attempt to go ahead and make their first attack upon, they were in the morning preparing their army to later, like in the afternoon, they were scheduled to start their main body attack for the first time on the Trojan city. And they were eating breakfast and preparing for for the battle. getting their men organized into their troops and to ready to march. And the prisoners, those two women prisoners they're very distraught. They were crying and they were very scared and they thought they were going to get raped. They hadn't got raped yet. They were sure they're going to get raped anytime, and it was probably likely that could have happened. And so the two priestesses of Apollo were in supplicating terror prayer to Apollo, the god, praying, "Help me, God, get out of here." And Apollo was listening to, and saying like, "Damn, I'm really pissed at Agamemnon. I'm really pissed at that army of Greeks, and I don't support them anymore. And I don't support them anymore at all. And I'm pissed at Achilles because I wasn't pissed at him yesterday, but I was in support of him. And I was also in support of Agamemnon yesterday. But now Achilles just pissed me off by chopping my statue's head off. And now he insulted me. And I'm definitely not for him anymore. I haven't decided what I'm going to do with him. And Agamemnon has two of my priestesses, two of my top two priestesses that are the high priestesses of all the priestesses in custody, and they're terrified in fear. They're praying to the Apollo to help them, and he's saying he's trying to figure out what he could do to go ahead and do it. So as he's trying to figure it out, the father of one of those high priestesses, who's also a high priest of Apollo, her dad is trying to get her out, and he's so distraught. My daughter's been taken prisoner. She's a high priestess of Apollo. I'm a high priest, and he's saying I got to get her out of there, and they're going to rape her. And before they rape her, I've got to go right now down there and get her out of there because she's going to be defiled, and if she gets raped, she'll not be able to be a high priestess anymore, even if she wanted to. And so basically, yeah, if she gets defiled and raped, it's the end of her priestness. Unfortunately, that's the way it was back then, that she can't be defiled. She's a virgin for life, and if someone defiles her, it ruins her ability to continue to be a priestess, and especially the leading one. So not only was Apollo utterly concerned to help her before someone rapes her, but I promise you that they were trying to find reasons for somebody to rape. Understand that the men would definitely rape these women at some point, and they would be trying to find reasons every second to maybe justify it. But ultimately, Apollo would be assaulting everybody and warning them, don't you dare even think about raping those prisoners. And so those men would be looking at those women thinking, wow, we'd love to rape them, but maybe we shouldn't, or we can get in trouble. Well, yeah, they would be only hesitating because Apollo would be yelling at them in spirit, saying, don't you dare do it, I'll kill you. And so ultimately, but that wouldn't stop them for long, and Apollo knew that. And understand that they wouldn't know why they would or wouldn't decide to rape them. Apollo knew that at some point they would decide to rape them. They justify they're not following Apollo, the god, and they're following Zeus. So it was only a matter of time before they were going to be defiled and ruined for life. And so the dad showed up with Apollo's scepter, the high priest father of that. He showed up he just walked right on the beach. So he was doing something insanely dangerous. He was actually a Trojan high priest of Apollo that had decided and took it upon himself just to walk right out onto the enemy encampment and ask for the company of the king. So it was an absurd, dangerous, insane move, because likely what should have happened